there's a significant and wide body of research demonstrating that minds can affect matter, minds can affect machines, minds can affect other minds at a distance and before and after the time that those phenomena are being studied.
I'm Heather Grish, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrish.com or on Instagram at heathergrish. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Today, I'm here with Dr. Patricia A. Muehsam, who is a pioneer in the synthesis of science, holistic health, and contemporary spirituality. She's distinguished herself as a practitioner, educator, and research scientist, and has been an influential force in shaping the landscape of healthcare options available today. Dr. Muehsam is the founder of Transformational Medicine, a whole-person approach to health and well-being, offering tools and resources for individuals and communities in person and online. She lives in New York City, and I'm so excited to meet you and interview you today, Dr. Muehsam.
Thank you, Heather. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you today.
Oh, it's good. It's just, I know how it is launching a book, and there's a lot of energy around it. And I'm excited because I'm hoping that we could get a little woo-woo today, actually. I'm personally kind of a practical, tangible gal, even though I studied Ayurveda. It's not like I'm an astrologer, but I don't have angel guides or anything like that, but it sounds like you've seen some pretty out there things that have shaped how you view healing and medicine. And in your book, Beyond Medicine, you've written about several personal experiences that forever changed your understanding of health and healing. Could you share a little bit about those experiences with our listeners?
Yeah, sure. The biggest and most profound experience I had was when I was in my early 20s. I started having out-of-body experiences, aka psychic experiences. And they were experiences that I had a little taste of earlier on in my life, but this was a period that was very rich and prolonged. And I had all sorts of abilities that we traditionally call paranormal or parapsychological, although I wouldn't call them abnormal in any way. They are actually elements of our inherent nature that when we can move to a different state, we can experience them. But anyhow, to make a long story short, I told people that I didn't need to tell about these experiences, and I ended up getting locked up in a psychiatric ward destined to be medicated for life. And both the experiences and the hospitalization were profoundly transformative for me. The experience themselves taught me that there is indeed a greater reality, a reality that's beyond our thinking brains, a reality that's beyond our 5 sensory experiences. And then that experience of being hospitalized taught me that much of what we understand to be tried and true in Western medicine is really otherwise. So that was one big experience. The second experience happened earlier on in my life, and it was in my family. My father, who was a healthy and vital and thriving human being on all levels, had a really catastrophic stroke that was devastating for him physically and mentally and emotionally. It left him paralyzed on one side, and it left him partially aphasic. Aphasic means he had difficulty finding the words he wanted to say. And he was quite young, relatively speaking, to have this kind of health issue. He was 49 years old. And he lived for quite a few more years. He was not just a survivor, he was quite a thriver, as he had been before then. But his progress in his terms of his healing was just arithmetic. It was just a little bit at a time. He improved a little bit physically in terms of his movement, in terms of his speech. And at that time, way back when, modern medicine and neurology deemed that, neurons don't regenerate. That's absolutely impossible. He's going to be basically a sort of vegetable on some level for the rest of his life, which is what his physicians told him. And quite a few years later, actually, when I was in my last year of medical school, I started studying acupuncture and energy medicine and electromagnetics with, I shall say, a very eccentric but brilliant physician scientist who had a unique approach to diagnosing and treating illness and had, quote, literally cured people of diagnoses that Western medicine deems incurable, chronic, intractable. And my father went to see him, and he embarked upon his treatment. And as I said, nearly 20 years later, his speech essentially returned. And that was a remarkable awakening for me to observe that, to bear witness to a cure that was beyond what I'd ever understood Western medicine to teach us about health and healing. So those were two big experiences. And then further along my way, I had more experiences. I struggled personally with health challenges, with navigating living in a body, with navigating experiences of being human, with challenging circumstances and situations. I won't go into detail, but suffice to say, those experiences, along with my bearing witness to what I call apparent miracles of healing, apparent miracles of phenomena that defy how we understand reality, how we understand consciousness, how we understand really life to be. These experiences just blew me away and further convinced me of a greater reality beyond that which we experience with our thinking brains, with our five senses, and further convinced me of the need and the absolute certainty of the possibility for healing beyond the bounds of conventional Western medicine, and that complete healing of all issues, no matter what Western medicine has deemed them to be. And mind you, I'm a Western trained physician living in a Western medical world, but that complete healing is absolutely possible. Absolutely possible.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you said that, because I'm sitting here trying to understand in your practice how you're trained in practicing conventional medicine. Is that what you're practicing as well?
No, my practice is not a conventional medical practice. I work with a number of different tools and systems that I've studied throughout my own journey, including elements of Chinese medicine, elements of Ayurveda. I've studied and trained in acupuncture, botanical medicine, both Western and from Asian systems like Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, mind-body medicine, energy medicine. It's very eclectic. It draws from everything that I've been exposed to. But what's significant about it is I don't work with the disease or the symptom the person has. I work with the person who has the disease or the diagnosis or the symptom. So it's person-centered, not disease or symptom-centered, which I'm sure you get because you're an Ayurvedic practitioner, and that's an essence of Ayurvedic practice, yes? So I don't eliminate the need for Western medicine. I require everybody to have a conventional Western workup before they work with me. And I work essentially as a holistic, whole person consultant and find and offer a roadmap for somebody's healing based on those tools that I mentioned. But again, it's individualized. And I also use what I call, and something I write about in the book as well, the four primary medicines, which are food, lifestyle, community and relationship, and purpose, what moves us, our life force. And those are all elements, as you know, of Asian traditional systems as well. But I individualize them as they are in Chinese medicine and Ayurveda to each person with whom I work. And a huge element of it is the mind-body connection and who we are internally, how we think and how we feel, how we process our experience of ourselves and our relationship to the world around us.
So you've drawn a lot of inspiration, sounds like, from the Rumi poem, The Guest House.
Yes, yes.
Could you talk a little bit about how that particular poem has inspired your work?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you. That poem actually is in a book of Rumi collections that my brother David gave to me. My brother David is somebody, we must have known each other in multiple past lives because we have very parallel paths and interests. And he gave me this book. It's a collection of Rumi poems called The Essential Rumi, edited by Coleman Barks. And when I was in the beginning of my book writing journey, which was a number of years ago, it has indeed been a journey. I was having a sleepless night with full of thoughts, full of ruminations, as you might say, about just what this book would be. And I went to my bookshelf, and this book literally fell off my bookshelf, literally. And it opened to this poem, The Guest House. And this poem, The Guest House, became my muse and my mentor and the inspiration for writing the book. The guest house is a metaphor. And in Rumi's poem, he talks about this guest house as a place to welcome all that we experience in our lives, whether it's light or dark, whether it's challenge or ease, whether it's struggle or pleasure. And the notion that welcoming everything in our lives as a gift from beyond, which is how he describes it, is really our path to well-being. And it's a metaphor that I use in the book. And it's also a place that I offer to my readers. It's a place where we can be taken care of, where we don't have to struggle to feel well and be well, where we don't have to struggle to experience difficulties in our lives with ease. And we do that by simply surrendering to being present. We surrender to being in the moment with what is and accepting it, allowing it, and embracing it. That may sound uncomfortable and awkward and maybe undesirable, but the essence of the book is it's through embracing what is that we can move beyond with what is that may be challenging to us.
First of all, I love that you had a book fall off of your shelf. I actually had a very similar experience with a different book, which was written by Buckminster Fuller, and I'd never read any Buckminster Fuller. And
oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'll have to tell you more about that later, but that really shaped me to have a book fall off the shelf. And it was like, this is my sign.
Wow.
I'm following.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
And this thing you're talking about where, this surrendering to being present, that's really hard for people that have the experience of some pain, whether that's physical or mental. What kind of practices for people who are experiencing, whether it's an emotional pain or a physical pain, obviously both are going to be present in the body. What kind of work would you do around that with someone?
Well, first I'll offer that it's the thinking and the feeling about that emotional pain and the thinking and the feeling about that physical pain. Not that physical pain doesn't exist, but it's the thoughts and the feelings around it that make that pain challenging and make it a pain that we want to avoid, that we want to suppress, push down, or run away from. And in fact, we're biologically programmed to do that. Our brain is made in such a way that we avoid pain. But what I offer people in my work and in my book are tools to be present with pain, to be present with difficult feelings, and to be present with physical pain, as long as not so unbearable that somebody's not able to exist vitally in their body. And I'll say that there's a caveat. We always need to get that checked out by a practitioner to make sure there's not something that very much needs to be addressed from a conventional medical perspective. But I offer tools in my work and in my book, since we're talking a little bit about my book, that help us to be present with what's going on in the moment. And it's by being present with the feeling that we ease the feeling. It's not the feeling that's causing the pain. It's the vibration and the emotion around the feeling that's causing the pain, if that makes sense. And there are 5 tools that I describe in the book. I call them the 5 absolute health tools. And they're tools that help us to cultivate presence, to cultivate being here now with what's going on, thinking-wise, feeling-wise, physical sensation-wise. And those 5 tools are breathing, mindfulness and meditation, journaling, mirror work, and mind-body sensing. And most of your listeners are probably familiar with the first 3, with breathing, mindfulness and meditation, and journaling, perhaps not with mirror work and mind-body sensing. The essence of all of them is that they literally toggle on, when we're doing them, the parasympathetic nervous system, which toggles on our body into a state of relaxation, rest, repair, rejuvenation, and healing. So it turns our nervous system from a state of vigilance or activity or stress, which we may be feeling around those experiences of thought, emotional, or physical pain, to a state of ease. It moves us from dis-ease to ease, from unrest to rest. And then I also suggest other tools, other healing practices. It can be very helpful to get into the physical body when we're feeling an uncomfortable emotion. So I suggest different types of body work. I also suggest different types of energy medicine. There's a technique that has helped me immensely personally that I use with my patients and in my workshops. It's called EFT, or tapping. It's an energy medicine technique, for those who haven't heard of it, that is essentially a marriage of Chinese medicine, meridian theory, and popular psychology. At its essence is this notion of being here now with what is, moment to moment. And then finally, one last mention regarding physical pain is that all physical pain has an emotional component. And often physical pain has at its root an emotional cause. And when physical pain has a very physical cause initially, perhaps a trauma physically, an accident, an injury, that physical pain, once it's become chronic, if it's lasted for longer, this is our Western medical definition, longer than 6 weeks or so, it's called chronic. That physical pain actually activates no longer the physical pain center in the brain, but it activates the emotional center in the brain. And even if it's immediate, that physical pain, or if it's chronic, if it's been going on for a long while, the sensations that travel along the highways of nerves in our body from that pain location to our brain that senses the pain, those nerve fibers, rather, travel along the same highway. They're linked to the emotional fibers that transmit emotions. So emotions and physical pain are always linked, which probably makes sense to everyone who's listening. If I'm feeling anxious and I've got a physical pain or a headache, my headache's going to get worse, right? And if I'm feeling angry about something and I'm having a pain, that's going to aggravate my pain. And my pain can aggravate emotional states. I can feel more anxious or more frustrated or in more despair if I'm in pain. So it's obviously that they're linked. But what's key is that we can have physical pain of long standing that's no longer rooted in the physical body. It can be very much rooted in the emotions solely. And it can be through feeling feelings, whatever's coming up around that pain, just as we feel feelings, whatever's coming up around uncomfortable feelings, that we can ease that pain. So in effect, being with the pain, the cure for the pain, can very well be found in the pain by being present with it. So I work with that essence as well, that notion. EFT, as I mentioned, is another technique that has been very helpful to help alleviate or at least reduce physical pain by the very nature of it being present with the pain experience and the emotions coming up around it. So that was a long, long reply to a shorter question. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, I think it's good. You also write about something in the book that you refer to as absolute health, and you kind of alluded to that a little bit earlier. When does a person know that they are experiencing absolute health?
Well, thank you for asking that. That's a term that I use in the title of the book that I use throughout the book. Absolute health is simply peace of mind. Peace of mind, inner peace, and it's our essential nature. It's the way we were born to be in a state of equanimity, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And it's the state of mind that we need to be in to heal whatever ails us, whether it's a health issue or whether it's circumstances and situations in our lives that are feeling challenging. This may seem implausible, perhaps even wishful thinking, but here's why. Our thoughts and our feelings affect our health and well-being instantaneously so. Every thought, every feeling is either creating a state of ease or dis-ease. A calm and peaceful mind creates a calm and peaceful body. A disturbed mind, a mind that's not at rest, creates stress in the body. So when the mind is calm, it activates that parasympathetic nervous system. That's the system we need for rest, rejuvenation, healing, as well as sleeping and digestion. That parasympathetic system lowers our blood pressure, lowers the rate of our heartbeat, lowers our breathing rate, and it turns on the digestive system and the feel-good chemicals in the brain. And it also readies us for resting and for sleeping if that's what we're needing. When the mind is not calm, it activates the sympathetic nervous system. That's a system we need to be alert, to be vigilant. If you're a New Yorker like I am, we need to be alert to traffic when we're crossing a busy street to make sure there's not a taxi running a red light. We need to know how to respond to an aggressive dog who might be coming our way. That sympathetic system, I'm sure everybody's heard of it, is sometimes referred to as a fight or flight or freeze system. It increases our blood pressure, it increases our heart and breathing rates. It activates the adrenal or stress hormones that make us alert and vigilant. It's very necessary when we need to be alert and vigilant. But it inhibits resting, rejuvenation, and healing. It inhibits digesting and sleeping. So that's why a calm mind, that's why a peaceful mind is where we need to be for healing to happen. And again, I call that calm mind absolute health. Absolute health is simply peace of mind, and it's the place we need to be for healing to happen.
A lot of people know that I got pregnant with my son on the first try and had him the year I turned 40. But a lot of people don't know that I first tried to get pregnant in my early 30s. The journey to motherhood was the most frustrating journey I have ever gone through. And that's what prompted me to write the book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility, about the methods that ultimately helped me through that journey and helped me come out healthier, more aligned with nature, and frankly, more mystified on the other side of it. So if you're really stumped about the things that are within your power to change in your fertility and reproductive health, and you are curious about what you might be able to activate by getting more in touch with your body through the methods I used, then connect with me on Instagram, because there are definitely ways to go through the process in complete surrender. So find me on Instagram at Heather Grish. That's at Heather, Grzych. All right, so you also talked about in your book that healing could be a return to the body or a departure from it. And it sounds like you even had experiences of leaving your body younger. And I think a lot of people have had those. And then there's this pain thing that some people experience where they leave the body as well because of the pain. But you also talk about that death as a form of departing from the body can also be a healing. And I would imagine that's probably really hard for a lot of people to accept. I mean, it's really hard for me because that's like some serious surrender stuff, right? That we have to deal with, although I suppose some people would have an easier time leaving.
Yeah, well, This idea may not sit well with a lot of my readers, and I even say so in the book. It may not sit well with you, but, hear me out for a moment or two. First of all, in our Western culture and in my Western training, we tend to view dying and death as distressing and unwished for experiences. In my medical training, we certainly lamented the decline of the physical body. My training taught me that disease is not desirable, it's bad, and dying and death are worse. And this cultural belief, this view of health, this distress over the demise of the physical body, it bred an environment, and it continues to breed an environment of fear around health. And fear can make us sick and can even keep us from getting well. But this idea of the body and the demise of the body, it's not a global belief. Not all spiritual and religious traditions believe so. And all non-Western healing traditions, whose cosmologies embody a more expansive understanding of life, one that exists beyond our material world, beyond our physical bodies, these traditions do not view death with fear, not as a catastrophic event, but merely as an interlude in the cycle of life, a natural aspect of our humanness. It's one to be honored and revered. So rather than cultivating fear, these traditions promote acceptance and grace. They encourage being fully with one's experiences of being human, including illness, including the process of dying and death. So what I offer to people is that, look, the bottom line is, as a friend of mine says, we're not going to get out of here alive. We don't get out of life alive. So how can we find equanimity around that? Can we learn to embrace this notion that illness is not bad, dying and death are not bad? Can we cultivate equanimity within? And yes, it may not sit easily with us. And in that context, I offer exercises and I offer posits for people as they read through it to just how do you deal with that? What feelings come up around that, right? Can we find inner peace around these scary notions in the face of illness, dying, and death, in the face of challenging circumstances and situations, in the face of this idea that we don't last forever? And what I offer is that healing may be a return to the physical body. And as I said, all conditions are theoretically curable. It may not be our destiny to be cured from a particular illness, but all physical illnesses, although they're mind, body, spirit illnesses, if you will, are theoretically curable, irrespective of what the conventional medical paradigm has told us. But healing may be a return for us to the body, or it may be a departure for us, for example, death. And yes, it is counter to our understanding of health only in the context of our Western understanding of health. So I offer two opportunities for people to try to wrap their heads around this and to also find a way to peace of mind around this notion of healing as dying. First, again, as I said earlier, when it comes to being with difficult feelings, being with the difficult feelings around these notions can help us ease those feelings around these notions. And another element of it, the second option I offer people to help them wrap not just their heads, but their hearts around it, is I share again about my own out-of-body experiences. And I spend a fairly large amount of the book, actually this is my favorite part of the book, it's my passion, talking about consciousness. And just what if we don't end when we die? Just what if we don't begin when we're born? Just what if some element of us, some essence of us exists before we were born and exists after we die? Just what if? What might that mean for our experience of living? What might that mean for how we experience and how we think and feel about illness and the process of dying and death for ourselves personally and for others? So I offer up a lot of the science behind it. There's a tremendous and robust body of research into this notion that consciousness doesn't exist only when we're alive and that it's non-local. It transcends our bodies and time. And I offer up a tremendous number of really remarkable stories that have changed my life, that have helped me to hang on to these greater notions of another reality beyond our thinking brains and our five senses. And I find that if we can first, again, be present with the scary or uncomfortable or maybe disturbing feelings coming up around it, and then explore these notions that, yeah, well, maybe there's a greater reality and life isn't really what I've been taught or what my culture explains to me that it is. Maybe I can find a path to peace around it all.
And yeah, I don't know, could you talk a little bit about the research that you found around consciousness? I was just reading one of the chapters in Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. I don't know if you've read that one. He said in that book that there really was an agreement in the scientific community about what consciousness really is. I've spoken with some neuroscientists about that too. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the research that you found and how they talk about consciousness. And you mentioned that it doesn't just exist when we're alive. Could you go a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, and before I do that, just following up on something that you said in your intro to this question is that I don't expect us to ever understand from any type of perspective, scientific, spiritual, or otherwise, anything in between, just exactly what consciousness is. And science is never the ultimate arbiter of truth. Science is just another looking glass through which we frame our experiences. It doesn't offer us absolute truth. What's meaningful is the scientific research that supports the notion that there is this phenomena that we are terming consciousness that we might say is unique to an individual human being, but it seems to behave beyond the constructs of linear time and three-dimensional space. So there's research that suggests that the mind, or aspect of the mind, and really saying mind is a little bit incomplete because mind is not separate from body, is not separate from beyond mind. And for anybody who's a real fan of this type of thinking, there's a fabulous book by a physician, scholar, Larry Dossey, who I'm actually honored to have write the foreword of my book. He's written some really scholarly pieces on the scientific explorations of consciousness. However, there has been, and there is, a tremendous wide body of robust, again, research supporting this notion that there are these aspects of, and I'll say mind for now, that transcend how our linear thinking brain and our five senses experience reality. Some of the earliest research comes from a laboratory at Princeton University that was called the PEAR, like the fruit, the PEAR Laboratory. It stood for, because it no longer exists, it transformed into various forms, and there's an upshot of it in the UK now. It stands for the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory. And this laboratory was founded by a preeminent scientist, aerospace engineer named Robert John, who was an expert in the field of rocket propulsion, including, for example, the science that sends rockets to Mars. So he has tremendous scientific expertise, and he became interested in exploring the powers of mind, if you will. And this laboratory set up experiments that took untrained volunteers, meaning people that didn't have any apparent psychic abilities, and had them interact with electronic machines. And what they found was that those people could interact and affect those electronic machines at a distance. They could interact and affect them just right in front of them from inches away. They could interact with those machines from thousands of miles away. They could affect the output of the machine. They also found that those individuals could affect the output of the machine before the machine ran. They also found that those individuals could affect those machines after the machines ran, which may sound really woo-woo, really out there, really impossible. These were blinded controlled studies, and what they did is they would run the machine on a Saturday and tell the individual to intend the outcome of the machine 2 days later on a Monday, and then they would unblind the research, and they found that those people were affecting the outcome of the machine after the machines ran. Now, of course, this defies our conventional understanding of time. But interestingly, the field of modern physics, which includes quantum mechanics and relativity, has come to understand the nature of time and the nature of space as completely different from how our five senses and our thinking brains experience time and space. This may be getting really out there for listeners and for my readers of my book too. And this is always really out there for me as well, because we really can't wrap our heads around this, because our thinking brains don't work according to time that flows backwards. But suffice to say, there is a significant and wide body of research demonstrating that minds can affect matter, minds can affect machines, minds can affect other minds at a distance and before and after the time that those phenomena are being studied. So I don't know if that was helpful. It's a lot of detail to go into, and I go into more detail and more explanation in the book. I talk also about the science of the field of parapsychology. Unfortunately, the term is a misnomer and I think does an injustice to the field, but there are fabulous scientists with really excellent credentials, engineers, physicists, psychologists, and physicians, studying the phenomena of mind over matter, mind affecting matter, mind affecting body. And they publish in peer-reviewed journals. They do good research. Unfortunately, none of this trickles down into my field. The Paralab research doesn't trickle down into medicine. The parapsychology research doesn't trickle down into medicine. And returning again to your question, I'm not so interested in how we come to understand consciousness or science can explain it, because I don't believe that we can. But I believe that we can explore the nature of nature, the nature of mind, and come to understand that it defies how we conventionally experience our five senses and our thinking brains. And that might have been a little bit out there what I just said, but suffice to say, these realities do exist, and science has documented it. If we don't have a way to explain it, we can actually demonstrate that it happens, even if we can't explain it. And I offer up all of this information in this chapter because I want people to suspend their disbelief. If they think it's absolutely impossible, absolutely implausible, I want them to suspend the disbelief and just ask themselves, well, what if? What if this were really so? What if it were really true? How might I live differently? Just the way I offered up, how might I live differently if I didn't begin and end at birth and death? So I'm not sure I came full circle to reply to your question and your intro about that, but I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I suspect there are some people listening who understand a little bit about what you're saying. And I think it's always really challenging to talk about it. And, you know, there's this, I love Rumi too. And one of the lines I love is, don't try to understand, I don't know if it's to the distances that's not for human beings. It's like, there's all this stuff that's out there that's going on, but you're human. There's only so much of it that you're going to understand, you know?
That's wonderful. Yeah. I don't know that Rumi poem. Maybe you'll share it with me after our talk.
You know, I have to find it. There's a great video of Coleman Barks doing a reading. Mm-hmm. I'll send you the video. I think that's where he says it. So I don't know which specific poem it's from. But, you know, thank you so much. I'm really happy that we've gone into some of this, you know, especially for anyone who's wanting to heal from anything, whether it's great or small, and to understand that there are things that are going on that are beyond what we can even perceive. And I think that a lot of what you talked about really opens people up to the possibility that they can have that absolute health in the moment, like you said, that peace of mind, that essential nature, and just being with what is, even if we don't know exactly how everything is working beyond our little fear right here of where our body is. I'd love to ask you the question. This is the question I ask everybody is, how would you define the wisdom of the body?
That's a great question. The wisdom of the body. I think first I would think of it as the wisdom of the body, mind, spirit, if you will. I know not everybody accommodates this notion of spirit, but it's that little voice inside of us that acts and moves and heals us when we get out of the way and when we settle down to a place of stillness. That wisdom of the body knows what we're needing for healing, knows what we're needing for anything and everything that's going on in our lives. And it speaks to us when we surrender and stop trying to fix or change or figure things out. And that's the essence of how our inner healer really does lie within. When we can stop and pause and listen within in that place of stillness between thoughts, if you will. And for those who are into mindfulness and mind-body practices, we don't have that all the time. The mind can be a monkey mind. It's the nature of the mind at times, but there are gaps between the thoughts that can keep us very energetically disconnected from that wisdom of the body that you speak of. And when we slow down to find the stillness, the body speaks and we hear it. And it's an intuitive knowing that just guides us to what we need next.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Muehsam. It's been so lovely to connect with you today. And if the listeners want to check out your book and learn how to work with you, what's the best way for them to look you up?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the best way to look me up is to find me via my website. And I love to dialogue with people. So there's a contact form and they can contact me via my website if they want to dialogue with me. My book info is on my website, as well as lots of tools and resources. There are ebooks, there are videos and writings and guided audios that are available to anybody who visits there to download or to listen to or to read from my website. And my website is transformationalmedicine.org.
Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Muehsam. It's been lovely connecting with you.
Thank you, Heather, for having me.
Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrish.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.